The viewport of the asterisk crescent dawn displayed the kind of absolute darkness that made even seasoned void travelers feel insignificant. Princess Valith stood with her hands clasped behind her back, watching the distant pinpricks of light that marked human settlements scattered across this remote sector. Her reflection in the reinforced glass showed a woman who looked deceptively human, save for the elongated, elegantly pointed ears that marked her as Andorian royalty. Those ears, currently adorned with 3 silver rings denoting her rank, had excellent hearing, which meant she could detect the barely suppressed sigh from Commander Kyrus standing 2 paces behind her. "You disapprove," she said without turning around. "I serve at your Highness's pleasure," Kyrus replied, which was diplomat speak for yes, absolutely, but I value my career. Valith allowed herself a small smile. Kyrus had been her guardian since she was 12, which gave him certain privileges, including the right to disapprove of her decisions, provided he did so respectfully. "You think reconnaissance is beneath us." "I think reconnaissance of humans is beneath us," he corrected. "We've conquered species with plasma weapons and quantum shielding. These people still use chemical propulsion for half their fleet. Chemical propulsion that somehow keeps holding territory against the Vrex Collective," Lieutenant Saron interjected from her station near the sensor array. She was younger than Kyrus, with the kind of earnest intensity that reminded Valith why she'd requested the lieutenant for this mission. Saron actually read reports instead of just skimming them for tactical data. Kyrus grunted, which was about as close to conceding a point as he ever got. The bridge of the asterisk crescent dawn hummed with the subtle vibration of the stellar compression drives, technology that humanity wouldn't develop for another century, assuming they survived that long. The ship itself was a masterpiece of Andorian engineering, sleek, deadly, and completely invisible to primitive scanning systems. They could drift through human space like ghosts, observing without being observed. It was, Valith had to admit, slightly voyeuristic, but the Imperial Court had questions about humanity's unexpected resilience, and she'd volunteered to find answers. Partly because the alternatives were either attending her sister's 4th wedding or listening to Chancellor Verost explain tax policy for 6 hours. This had seemed preferable. "Your Highness," called Myra from the tactical station. She and her twin sister Kess operated as a single unit, finishing each other's sentences and processing combat data with eerie synchronization. "We're approaching the coordinates. Asteroid field, designation AR-7743. Mining colony," Kess added. "Population 312, 11 active extraction sites. Current yields indicate significant deposits of Iridium-7. Valith's interest sharpened. Iridium-7 was valuable, the kind of valuable that started wars. And the Colonial Defense Force presence. "Minimal," Myra said. "The sector is technically protected, but actual military assets are spread thin. According to intercepted communications, the nearest CDF patrol is 6 hours away. Which makes it a tempting target," Kyrus observed. His tactical mind was already working through scenarios. "If I were a mercenary company looking for a quick score." The sensor array lit up with new contacts before he could finish the thought. "Speak of the devil and he shall appear," Saron muttered, her fingers dancing across her console. "Multiple ships dropping out of jump space. Configuration matches known mercenary patterns. I'm reading. 43 distinct combat signatures. Mix of species, some Vrex, a few Koltari, and—" She paused, her expression tightening. "At least 6 renegade Andorian energy signatures." The temperature on the bridge seemed to drop several degrees. Renegade Andorians were a source of profound shame to the Empire, warriors who had abandoned honor for profit. They were also extremely dangerous because they knew all the same tactics and technologies as the Imperial forces. "They're moving toward the colony," Kess reported. "Attack formation." Valith moved closer to the main display, watching the tactical overlay update in real time. The mercenary ships were dropping toward the asteroid's surface with the kind of precision that spoke of planning and practice. This wasn't opportunistic raiding, this was a coordinated strike. Can we alert the colonists? Not without revealing our presence, Kyrus said, and the CDF won't arrive in time. They all knew what came next. They would watch, record, and report. It was the purpose of reconnaissance. The deaths of 300 humans were regrettable but not unprecedented in the Empire's long history of observation. Valith had been raised to think strategically, to weigh individual lives against larger political considerations. But standing there, watching those mercenary ships descend like predators toward prey, she found the coldness of that calculation difficult to stomach. "Your Highness," Saron said suddenly, "I'm detecting a single combat signature on the asteroid surface. Human. Looks like powered armor, but the energy readings are inconsistent. Damaged, maybe." "One person," Valith leaned forward. "Against 43. The signature isn't moving toward shelter," Myra observed. "It's moving toward the landing zone." "That's suicide," Kyrus said flatly. "That's human," Saron corrected, something almost like admiration creeping into her voice. The mercenaries were touching down now, their ships kicking up clouds of asteroid dust in the low gravity. Valith could see them on the visual feed, a motley collection of species united only by greed and violence. They moved with professional efficiency, spreading out in standard assault formations. And there, visible now on the magnified display, was a single figure in battered Colonial Defense Force armor. The human wasn't running, wasn't hiding. He was standing in the open, approximately 200 meters from the nearest mercenary position, holding what scanners identified as a standard-issue plasma rifle. The armor's power cell was operating at 37% capacity. His oxygen supply showed 4 hours remaining. By every rational measure, he was looking at certain death. "Enhance visual," Valith commanded. The display zoomed in and she could see details now. The armor was scarred and patched, marked with the kind of wear that came from actual combat rather than parade ground drills. On the shoulder plate, barely visible through the dust, was a name stenciled in human script, REEVES. "He's activating his external speakers," Saron reported, "broadcasting on open channels." Through the Crescent Dawn's sophisticated audio systems, they heard a human voice, male, surprisingly calm given the circumstances. "Attention unidentified vessels. This is Captain Adrian Reeves, Colonial Defense Force. You are in violation of territorial sovereignty. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded." There was a moment of silence. Then, crackling through the channel, came laughter. Multiple voices, multiple species, all apparently finding humor in the same joke. "Did he just—" Kess began. "Demand their surrender," Myra finished. "I like him," Valith said, surprising herself with the admission. The human Reeves didn't wait for a response. He opened fire. The first plasma bolt caught a Vrex mercenary square in the chest, sending the reptilian tumbling backward in the low gravity, with the kind of slow-motion grace that would have been beautiful if it weren't so lethal. Valith watched the targeting data scroll across her display and felt her pulse quicken despite herself. The human had made that shot from 200 meters in 0.3 gravity while standing on unstable regolith. That wasn't luck, that was skill. "He's moving," Myra reported, her voice carrying a note of professional interest. "Using the mining equipment as cover. Smart." Smart was an understatement. Reeves had already rolled behind a massive ore processor, and the mercenaries' return fire was chewing up expensive machinery instead of human flesh. Valith could see the tactical logic immediately. Force the enemy to damage the very equipment they'd come to steal. It wouldn't stop them, but it might make them hesitate, think twice about their approach vectors. 38 hostiles converging on his position, Kess announced. "He's completely surrounded. Tactical analysis suggests he has approximately 90 seconds before they overrun him." 90 seconds. Valith found herself counting heartbeats, watching as the human did something that made Commander Kyrus lean forward with a sharp intake of breath. Reeves had somehow scaled the ore processor and was now on top of it, using the high ground to devastating effect. 3 more mercenaries went down in quick succession, and the human's plasma rifle was glowing with heat stress. "His weapon's going to fail," Lieutenant Saron said, fingers flying across her console as she analyzed the energy signatures. "The cooling system can't handle that rate of fire in vacuum conditions. He's got maybe 20 shots left before it overheats completely." "Then he'll use something else," Kyrus said quietly. There was something in his voice that Valith rarely heard, respect for an opponent. "Watch his movement pattern. He's not trying to kill them all, he's trying to slow them down." Valith zoomed in on the colony structures visible in the background. Through their sensors, she could detect movement, civilians streaming through underground maintenance tunnels toward a cluster of emergency escape pods. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Reeves wasn't making a last stand because he was crazy or suicidal. He was buying time for an evacuation. "That's actually quite noble," she said softly. "In a doomed, utterly hopeless sort of way." "Noble doesn't defeat 40 mercenaries," Kyrus observed. "But it might let 300 colonists live long enough to escape." A Koltari heavy trooper was attempting to flank using jump jets, arcing through the thin atmosphere toward Reeves' position. The human spun, tracked the target's trajectory with casual precision, and fired 3 times. The first 2 shots missed, deliberately, Valith realized, forcing the Koltari to adjust his flight path. The 3rd shot hit the jump jet pack directly, and the resulting explosion sent the trooper spinning away into the asteroid field like a very surprised firework. "Did he just calculate the exact trajectory needed to?" Saron began. "Yes," Myra and Kess said in unison. "Show off," Valith muttered, though she was grinning now. There was something infectiously audacious about watching this lone human treat an impossible battle like a particularly challenging training exercise. The mercenaries had stopped laughing. Their communications chatter, helpfully translated by the Crescent Dawn's asterisk systems, had shifted from mocking to frustrated to genuinely worried. Apparently losing 7 fighters to a single opponent in the first 4 minutes wasn't part of their operational plan. They were adapting now, moving with more caution, using proper suppressing fire and coordinated advances. "They're learning," Kyrus noted. "He can't keep this up much longer." As if to prove the commander's point, Reeves' plasma rifle finally gave up entirely, the weapon's barrel glowing white-hot before the whole thing cracked with thermal stress. The human tossed it aside and immediately grabbed what looked like an industrial cutting torch from the ore processor's maintenance kit. "You've got to be kidding me," Saron said. "That's not a weapon, that's for cutting through rock." "Everything's a weapon if you're creative enough," Valith observed. "Or desperate enough." Reeves proved her right by jury-rigging the torch into something that resembled a flamethrower, sort of, if you squinted and were generous with your definitions. When the next wave of mercenaries came around the processor, they were met with a stream of superheated plasma that had absolutely no business being used in that fashion. The fact that it worked, sending 3 attackers scrambling backward with damaged armor, seemed to surprise the human as much as anyone. Through the audio feed, they heard him say something that the translator rendered as, "Well, that's concerning for several safety regulations." Despite herself, Valith laughed. Here was someone facing certain death with improvised weapons and failing equipment, and he was worried about safety regulations. The battle had been raging for 20 minutes now, and the human's armor was failing in cascading stages. His power cell was down to 14%. Oxygen at 3 hours 10 minutes. The HUD readout, visible through their enhanced sensors, showed multiple warnings about environmental seal integrity and servo assist failures. By all rights, he should have been dead or captured 10 minutes ago. Instead, he'd somehow migrated to a different position entirely, now using a massive mining drill as both cover and weapon. The drill wasn't designed for combat. It was designed to bore through asteroid rock. But Reeves had activated it anyway, and was wielding the thing like the galaxy's most impractical sword. A renegade Andorian made the mistake of getting too close, and the spinning drill bit caught his energy shield at an angle that sent harmonics shrieking through the mercenary's armor. The Andorian went down clutching his ears, his shield generator smoking. "That shouldn't work," Myra said, sounding personally offended by the physics involved. "It shouldn't," Kess agreed. "But somehow it did." "Luck," Kyrus suggested, though he didn't sound convinced. "Luck 20 times in a row." Valith shook her head. "No, this is something else." The mercenary leader, a scarred Vrex with enough augmentations to be classified as a small tank, finally stepped into view, broadcasting on open channels. "Human, you've made your point. You're skilled, you're brave, you're completely insane, but this ends now. Surrender and we'll let you live. Keep fighting and we'll tear you apart slowly." There was a pause. Then Reeves' voice came through, slightly breathless but carrying a tone of cheerful defiance. "I appreciate the offer, I really do, but I'm going to have to go with option 3. You take your collection of rejected action figures and get off my rock before I really start getting creative." "Rejected action figures," Saron repeated, checking the translation. "Is that accurate?" "Unfortunately, yes," the ship's AI confirmed. The Vrex leader roared something that definitely violated several interspecies communication protocols. The mercenaries surged forward in a coordinated assault, and for a moment Valith thought this was finally it. The humans' luck and skill had run out. But Reeves did something that made even Kyrus curse in admiration. He'd been standing next to one of the asteroid's primary mining charges, explosives meant to fracture rock for easier extraction. He triggered it. The explosion sent everyone, including Reeves, flying in different directions. The low gravity meant the debris field expanded slowly, beautifully, lethally. The human had somehow angled himself toward another equipment cluster, while most of the mercenaries were sent tumbling away into less advantageous positions. His armor's impact warnings were screaming, and his oxygen was venting from a new breach, but he was still moving. "He blew himself up," Valith said flatly, "as a tactical maneuver." "Humans," Kyrus muttered, in the tone of someone reassessing an entire species threat level. "Absolutely mad." The human's oxygen supply hit critical levels at the 47-minute mark. Valith watched the readout with something approaching genuine concern, which was unusual for her. She'd observed countless battles from this exact position, clinical, detached, recording data for imperial analysis. But there was something about this particular human's refusal to acknowledge basic reality that made detachment difficult. "He's still fighting," Saron reported, her voice carrying disbelief. "Oxygen at 8%. That should be causing impaired judgment, tunnel vision, loss of motor control." "Perhaps it is," Kyrus suggested. "That would explain why he just tried to use a welding arm as a grappling hook." "It worked, though," Myra pointed out. "That's not the point," Kyrus replied, though his protest sounded half-hearted. Reeves had somehow managed to reach the colony's central hub, dragging himself through the thin atmosphere with what had to be pure spite at this point. The mercenaries had pulled back slightly, not retreating but reassessing. They'd lost 14 fighters to 1 human with a collection of mining equipment. The cost-benefit analysis was starting to look questionable. Valith made a decision that surprised even herself. "Saron, how long until the colonists complete their evacuation?" "Another 6 minutes, Your Highness. The last pod is loading now." 6 minutes? The human probably didn't have 6 minutes. His oxygen was nearly gone. His armor was held together by what looked like emergency sealant and optimism, and he was visibly slowing down. Even through the sensors, Valith could see the way his movements had become sluggish, uncoordinated. He was dying by degrees, and they were all watching it happen. "We could intervene," she said quietly. The bridge went silent. It was the kind of silence that followed genuinely shocking statements, like announcing plans to colonize a black hole or declaring war on mathematics. "Your Highness," Kairos began carefully, "our orders are strict observation, no contact with human forces, no interference in local conflicts, and certainly no revealing our presence to protect a single combatant, however. Impressive he might be. I'm aware of our orders, Commander. Then you're also aware that saving this human would violate about 17 Imperial protocols and possibly trigger a diplomatic incident." 18 protocols, Kess corrected. 19 if we count the one about not stealing other species warriors. "We're not stealing him," Valith said. "We're preventing valuable intelligence from dying before we can interrogate it." Kairos gave her a look that suggested he knew exactly what she was doing and was simultaneously exasperated and impressed by the creative justification. "That's a very thin rationalization, Your Highness." "Then it's fortunate I'm royalty and can make thin rationalizations into official policy." She turned to Myra. "Prepare a recovery team. Full stealth approach. Extract the human as soon as the colonists complete their evacuation." "What about the mercenaries?" Myra asked. Valith smiled, and it wasn't a particularly nice smile. "Encourage them to leave. Use whatever methods seem appropriate." Below, on the asteroid's surface, Reeves had found one last surprise for his attackers. He'd somehow managed to access the colony's environmental controls and was venting the emergency oxygen reserves through the main processing facility. It created a cloud of breathable atmosphere that hung in the low gravity like a localized weather system. More importantly, it meant he could breathe for a few more minutes. "Clever," Saron said. "He's using the oxygen as both life support and concealment. The cloud is disrupting targeting sensors." The mercenary leader was broadcasting again, and his translator was apparently struggling with the sheer quantity of profanity involved. The general sentiment seemed to be that Reeves had crossed some important line between worthy opponent and actively annoying menace, and that this was now personal. "Can't imagine why he'd be upset," Valith murmured. "His simple smash-and-grab operation has only turned into an hour-long siege against improvised mining equipment." The last evacuation pod launched, a bright streak against the black sky. Reeves must have seen it too, because he stopped moving. Just stood there in his damaged armor, swaying slightly in the low gravity, watching the colonists escape. Then through the audio feed, they heard him laugh, a short, breathless sound that might have been relief or exhaustion or both. "All yours now, gentlemen," he broadcast to the mercenaries. "The minerals, the equipment, the whole rock. I hope it was worth it. We'll kill you slowly for this," the Vrex leader promised. "Get in line," Reeves replied. "My ex-wife has dibs." That was when the Asterisk Crescent Dawn's Asterisk recovery team materialized behind him. 4 Andorian soldiers in full stealth armor appearing out of apparently empty space. To his credit, Reeves didn't jump or scream. He just turned his head slowly, looked at the massive armored figures surrounding him, and said something the translator rendered as, "Well, this day just keeps getting weirder." Sergeant Thane, leading the recovery team, moved with efficient precision. He applied an emergency oxygen mask to Reeves' helmet breech, stabilized the failing armor with quick-seal patches, and was lifting the human in a carry harness before the mercenaries even realized something was happening. They realized it about 3 seconds later when the Asterisk Crescent Dawn dropped its stealth field and activated its weapon systems. The warship appeared in the sky like an angry god, bristling with technology that made the mercenary vessels look like children's toys. Every weapon port was lit and locked on target. "Attention mercenary forces," Valith broadcast, her voice carrying the full weight of Imperial authority. "You are in the presence of the Andorian Empire's reconnaissance vessel Asterisk Crescent Dawn Asterisk. You have 30 seconds to depart this system before we demonstrate why picking fights with wounded soldiers is considered poor manners in civilized space." The mercenary ships began powering up their drives before she'd finished speaking. Whatever profit they'd hoped to make from Iridium-7, it wasn't worth engaging an Andorian warship. Within 20 seconds, the entire force was in full retreat, jumping away to whatever hole they'd crawled out of. "I think they're gone," Kyrus observed dryly. "Shame," Valith replied. "I was hoping someone would be stupid enough to argue." The recovery team materialized on the bridge with their cargo, and Valith got her first real look at Captain Adrian Reeves, without censor interpolation. He was tall for a human, though still shorter than any Andorian. His armor was worse in person, more patched than original material at this point. Through the damaged helmet visor, she could see a face that was pale from oxygen deprivation, smudged with dust and blood, and wearing an expression of profound confusion. "Medical bay," she ordered, carefully. "I want him alive and conscious when he wakes up. I have questions." "Your Highness," Reeves mumbled through the oxygen mask, his words slurring with hypoxia. "Am I dead? Because if this is the afterlife, I'd like to file a complaint about the decor." "You're not dead," Valith assured him. "You're aboard an Andorian warship, which may or may not be worse depending on your perspective." "Ah," he said, then passed out. Kyrus moved to stand beside Valith as the medical team whisked Reeves away. "You realize we've just kidnapped a Colonial Defense Force officer, violated our mission parameters, and revealed our presence to both humans and mercenaries." "I prefer to think of it as aggressive intelligence gathering," Valith replied. "Besides, I really do want to know how he survived that long, don't you?" The commander was silent for a moment, watching the medical bay doors close. "Yes," he finally admitted. "Yes, I really do." Reeves woke up to the peculiar sensation of being completely pain-free, which was so unusual for a Colonial Defense Force officer that his first thought was that he actually had died. His second thought, upon opening his eyes and seeing the curved ceiling of what was clearly alien medical technology, was that death had surprisingly good interior lighting. "You're awake," came a voice that carried both authority and something that might have been amusement. "Try not to move too quickly. Our medical systems work efficiently, but your body needs time to adjust." He turned his head slowly and found himself looking at a woman who appeared human, except for the distinctly non-human ears that swept back from her head in elegant points. She was tall, regal, and wearing what his battered brain identified as either a military uniform or the galaxy's most intimidating evening wear. Behind her stood 4 figures in combat armor that made CDF equipment look like cardboard boxes with delusions of grandeur. "So," Reeves said, his voice rough but functional, "I'm going to take a wild guess and say you're not from the Colonial Hospitality Committee." The woman's lips twitched. "Princess Valith of the Andorian Empire. And no, hospitality committees rarely travel in warships." "Princess?" Reeves considered this. "Should I bow? I'm not sure the protocols for being rescued/kidnapped by royalty." "Rescued," Valith corrected. "Though I suppose the distinction is semantic. When you're on a ship you can't leave." One of the armored figures, Reeves was pretty sure it was male based on the voice, made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. The princess shot him a look that could have frozen plasma. "Commander Kyrus finds your situation amusing," she explained. "He's been doing reconnaissance for 40 years and this is his first kidnapping. He's excited." "Thrilled," Kyrus confirmed, his tone absolutely deadpan. Reeves sat up carefully, noting that someone had removed his destroyed armor and replaced it with what felt like medical garments that were probably worth more than his annual salary. "So what happens now?" Interrogation, mind-probing, strongly worded questions about human military capabilities. "Actually, I wanted to ask you something simpler." Valith moved closer, and Reeves realized her eyes were a shade of violet that didn't exist in any human genome he knew of. "Why didn't you run?" "From the mercenaries." He considered the question seriously. The colonists needed time to evacuate. Someone had to slow the mercenaries down. "But why you specifically?" Because I was there. He said it like it was obvious because to him it was. Look, Your Highness, just Valith is fine when we're discussing philosophy. Valith then, where I come from you don't need a complicated reason to help people. They needed help. I could provide it. The math was simple. A different voice spoke up, female, coming from one of the other armored figures. You fought 43 combatants with mining equipment. That's not simple math. That's insanity. Lieutenant Saron has a point, Valith agreed. By any tactical analysis, you should have died in the first 5 minutes. Reeves shrugged. I was highly motivated. Also, I may have been running on 3 days of sleep deprivation and enough stimulants to wake a small moon. Judgment gets questionable around hour 72. That got actual laughs from the guards, quickly suppressed but definitely there. Even Valith was smiling now, and Reeves found himself oddly pleased that he could make an alien princess smile while discussing his near-death experience. We watched the entire battle, she said. My tactical officer still can't explain how you survived the mining charge explosion. Trade secret, Reeves replied. Also known as I have no idea and I'm as surprised as anyone. The conversation continued for hours, moving from his tactics to his background to his opinions on everything from human-Andorian relations to whether the * Crescent Dawn's * coffee dispenser deserved to be classified as a war crime. Valith was sharp, curious, and had a dry wit that matched his own. Her guards gradually relaxed, adding their own observations and questions. The twins, Myra and Kess, wanted to know about human close-quarters combat techniques. Kairos was interested in his improvisation methods. Saron asked about colonial defense force training protocols. By the second day, Reeves was walking the ship freely, escorted but not guarded, and the crew had stopped treating him like a prisoner or a curiosity. He fixed their coffee dispenser, which earned him genuine gratitude from the engineering staff. He taught the twins a card game that resulted in them winning his entire non-existent fortune. He debated military philosophy with Kairos and discovered the old commander had a wicked sense of humor hidden under all that professional stoicism. On the third day, Valith found him in the observation deck, staring at the stars. Homesick? She asked. Thinking, he corrected, about how weird the universe is. 3 days ago, I was pretty sure I was going to die on an asteroid fighting mercenaries. Now I'm drinking alien coffee, which is actually good. By the way, you should fire whoever programmed the dispenser before I fixed it, and making friends with people who could probably conquer my entire species if they felt like it. We're not interested in conquest, Valith said quietly. Not anymore. Watching you fight changed something for us, for me specifically. Changed what? She was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. We've spent centuries assuming that superior technology and military might were what mattered in the galaxy. That species without our advantages were somehow lesser. Then we watched one human with broken equipment and no logical chance of survival fight for an hour because people needed help. It was instructive. Instructive is one word for it, stupid is another. Brave, she countered, selfless, remarkable. Reeves felt his face heat, which was ridiculous. He was a combat officer, not some kid receiving his first commendation. I just did what anyone would do. That's what makes it remarkable. You genuinely believe that. She turned to face him fully. I'm sending you home tomorrow. Your people are probably worried, and I've pushed my luck with this unauthorized rescue far enough. But I wanted you to know that my report to the Imperial Court will recommend formal diplomatic relations with humanity. Equal partners, not subjects. Because I didn't die on an asteroid. Because you showed us that desperation and determination can be more powerful than any weapon we've designed. And because any species that produces people like you is worth knowing. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars drift past. Finally, Reeves said, if you're ever in human space again, look me up. I'll buy you a drink. Real coffee, not that synthetic stuff. I'd like that, Valith replied and meant it. The next morning, a CDF patrol ship received the shock of its collective life when an Andorian warship decloaked, transmitted a friendly greeting, and returned one Captain Adrian Reeves, who was healthy, cheerful, and carrying a data chip containing more information about the Andorian Empire than humanity had gathered in 50 years of long-range observation. His report took 6 hours to deliver and was immediately classified at the highest levels. But the essential truth was simple. Humanity had been noticed, evaluated, and deemed worthy of respect by one of the galaxy's major powers. All because one man had been too stubborn to know when he was beaten. Valith watched from orbit as Reeves rejoined his unit, then ordered the Asterisk Crescent Dawn back to Andorian space. She had a report to file, a diplomatic revolution to start, and the memory of a human who fought impossible battles with mining equipment and made her believe that maybe, just maybe, the galaxy was more interesting than she'd ever imagined. Kairos approached her command chair. "Your grandmother is going to have questions about this mission." "Let her question," Valith replied, smiling. "I have answers."